Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you're all doing well out there. We got an interesting one tonight. The topic in question here almost feels similar to what we discussed last time on the show with old versus new, female characters and how they're written. So we got another suggestion tonight from Princess Heather Blossom, who's joining us. How are you doing tonight, Heather?
Pretty chill.
Nice. And joining us for this one, we've also got Hariman. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing pretty good.
Nice. And
I have escaped the month of August.
Yeah. And we got DJ with us tonight. How are you doing tonight, DJ?
Bienvenue.
I'm doing all right. How's everybody going? Let's have a fun little talk.
Nice. So, Heather, what made you want to talk about this? Because we talked about one of your suggestions last time with old versus new. So this seems like almost a follow-up or an even broader perspective on a debate topic here. So what made you want to do this tonight?
Well, really, I was just brainstorming ideas and doing old versus new. Like, this is kind of like a broadened version of that topic because I find it, easy and fun to make parallels between what we have now and what we had before and how it's evolved, how the industry has changed, and, whether it's good to, go back and think, hey, did we leave something behind here that we should have kept? Should we try to incorporate it again? Things like that.
Alrighty then. So with that, let's read off our patron slide real quick here. Very grateful to all of my generous supporters on Patreon, making the bills easier to pay and the content easier to produce, especially those on the $10 and up tier. These are Princess Heather Blossom, who's with us tonight. There's also Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, who's with us tonight, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, Pony Cordero, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden MacManx, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, ZoroArk 720, Mr. Sonic 31, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Please check out all their links in the description, and if you'd like to be on the show, I'd love to have you. We'll just get you on the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. So anyway, Heather, start us off with some opening thoughts.
Well, I think one of the biggest aspects that has evolved since the yesteryear time have been visuals. Like, things like 2D animation have gotten easier. Things like CG have completely changed the playing field. Like, if you think back to cartoons, it used to take forever to make them because each panel had to be drawn, redrawn, page after page after page, which is a monotonous and time-consuming way to make media. But these days, people are making cartoons in the comfort of their own homes on a single computer, not having to redraw every single thing. These days, drawing something page by page, traditional animation is more of a novelty. It almost seemed for a bit that 2D was going to be phased out because a lot of big companies have turned to using CG, which is a lot easier because it's kind of like filming in real life because, they make a set and just have 3D models they can move around at will like actors, except they don't have to deal with an actor's attitude unless you're talking about voice actors. But I guess what I'd say with that is that our standards of how visually our media is portrayed have definitely heightened as technology and efficiencies have evolved. It's almost too good because I wanted to use the example Beast Wars for visuals. At the time, CG, computer animated graphics were a new thing, and Beast Wars was at the time, that was the best you could do, and people were like, oh, it looks so good, and the storyline, and so it was ahead of its time, and it was critically acclaimed for that. But looking back on it, we would watch that show and think oh, it looks like a PS1 game. What is this? It's terrible. But of course, it's because we've evolved.
Alrighty then.
Technology-wise.
So you're coming at it from more of a technological aspect.
Yeah, that's where my mind mostly is at, but I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on, like, has, the written form of entertainment standard gone up or down? What's changed about it? And, like, where we go from here? Was there something we left behind that we should bring back?
Well, what I'll say is that I don't think like the public standards have really changed all that much. But there is a lot more of it. Generally speaking, more people just want the story and the acting to be good, and and the visuals to be competent, and generally people to be passionate about the project. Now, if we're talking, we'll say 1980s and previous, it was a huge investment, and it still is. But it was more so back then because the technology wasn't readily as available, and the manpower to create TV shows and especially cartoons wasn't as readily available. You needed hundreds of people to churn out the same project that we can probably do with less due to computers now. We also had to pay them a lot better because, people would not have worked back then for the compensation that they tend to get now in the entertainment industry. So if you were going to convince a studio to greenlight your project, it had to be freaking good. And you had to know the right people, and everybody involved in that was going to do their best to make sure it was as good as possible, because if your name was stuck onto something that sucked, that followed you for the rest of your life, and it was very difficult to find work after that. And generally, people had higher standards of morality back then as well, for, I'll admit, both better and worse. Like, there's certain things that we couldn't show, and then that would cross over into censorship at points in time. But, so ultimately you just had to really make sure that everything was good, as good as it possibly could have been. And because it took more manpower, there weren't so many people going off becoming their own content creators with, their cell phones on YouTube and TikTok and MySpace and SoundCloud and things like that. Because the technology
you really dated yourself with MySpace, I just gotta say.
Whatever, MySpace became a music platform. All right. But there's a lot more of it now. So people don't have to just watch, whatever game show is on one of the 3 networks or the news tonight. Because there's 2 or 3 TV stations, right? And even like when we were growing up, there were 100 TV stations on average, and you could pick between all that. People can watch pretty much whoever they want, whenever they want, whatever kind of niche content that panders specifically to them, and there's probably a significant enough audience to go look for it. So I don't think the standards ultimately have changed. I think there's just way more choice out there.
Yeah, definitely.
DJ, what do you think?
Let Heather go first.
Okay.
Oh no, go. I'm doing a lot of talking. You need to.
How do I want to word it? I feel that nowadays, audiences are, because I'm gonna focus a lot more on the audience end on this topic. I feel like over the years we've got more critical, but also somehow more forgiving as well. Which, it's a weird dichotomy that things are judged so harshly, but also given so much slack.
Elaborate.
Examples.
Well, for forgiving, sadly, I got to point to Marvel. Especially in the most recent years, it hasn't been very good, but everyone is super forgiving because it's Marvel. Because they've had these 10 years of good luck, and now things aren't quite as good as they used to be, and they're taking a lot of shortcuts, but people give them a lot of goodwill that I don't think they have earned quite as much as they have over the past couple years. But also from more critical, I would point to, let's see, a specific example of a critical, because this one feels like a more in general one, because like it's much harder for movies that aren't franchises or TV shows that aren't related to a franchise to really pick up. They're quickly criticized if they're not up to snuff of everything around them. And you also get that with returning franchises, where sometimes they can still be fine based on nostalgia and other stuff, but if it's not up to a certain standard for some people, it is instantly criticized. I know Ghostbusters Afterlife got some pretty harsh words from critics when it first released. And some of that you can wave off for people still being annoyed from 2016, but some of it is still leftovers from trying to compare it to the first Ghostbusters.
So let me ask you a couple of questions here, DJ. Are we absolutely sure that there's that kind of audience standard going on when we have things like Netflix greenlighting everything out here, and for the most part the ratings being halfway decent for a lot of it?
On which end?
Audience. Like, there's been a few notable outliers of things just bombing really horribly that were supposedly supposed to be popular, or things that are just universally received horribly. So, like Cuties is always the first example to come to my head. But you know, it was just a couple of years ago, right before COVID. You know, everybody was getting greenlit at Netflix. South Park even did a joke on it where, you know, they had a Netflix employee pick up the phone and say, "Hello, thank you for calling Netflix. You're greenlit. What can I do for you?"
Okay, but why is that a bad thing?
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, are you sure that when things like that can happen, is the audience really that much more critical of what they're taking in?
I don't think Netflix is all that good of an option, because as much as Netflix has, it's hard for people to really find anything on Netflix. Because most people are just going to open Netflix and they're going to see something on the front page and click the play button.
I see. So it's
I don't think Netflix is a good place to gauge that kind of response.
Yeah, in my case, like, I just kind of go on there when I'm looking for a series that I already watched and I want to rewatch. And then, like, sometimes they won't even have it. It's like, oh, I'm out.
And if they don't have, and if you finish a series, what are you most likely to do? You're going to look at what does Netflix recommend that's similar to that series.
Yeah, sometimes.
So really, I don't think Netflix is the gauge for that. Netflix is kind of its own little. It's like America.
It started it.
What are you trying to say, Hariman?
All the things that I've watched that are on Netflix, I have been directed to by word of mouth and not by anything Netflix has done to direct me to them.
Okay, so that's a bad example that I tried to pull then. Got it.
Yeah, I don't think Netflix quite works for that.
Okay. So, Hariman, what do you think about all this? Do you have any angles that you want to tackle?
I think it depends on whether you're going through mainstream production studios or the more outsider production studios. And sometimes depending on whether you have people who actually care in those mainstream studios for the property.
Okay, so that's a little bit more on the production angle as well, which is kind of like what I was talking about.
For mainstream production, their standards have changed to check the boxes first, everything else whatever, which is why you get shows where when somebody actually looks at them that's like unbiased and doesn't have a dog in the fight, like She-Hulk, for example, it's an okay show. There's some pretty bad points, and a lot of people are going to hate it because those bad points just rub them the exact wrong way and jump into the elevator, press all the buttons, and jump out. And then watch the businessman.
Go ahead, Heather.
And then watch the businessman fume as he takes an extra hour to get to his meeting. Go ahead, Heather.
I was just saying, can I say the only thing I've heard about She-Hulk is how much they want She-Hulk to twerk? That is literally all I've seen.
Nobody should ever twerk sincerely. It should always be done ironically as a way to disgust and offend the person you are twerking at. And they twerked sincerely in She-Hulk.
Yeah, that's just what I would see, though. It's just like, hey, that Meg chick's gonna be in She-Hulk. You think she'll show She-Hulk how to throw some ass?
Meg chick.
I don't know.
It's the one thing she knows how to do, and she doesn't even do it well because nobody can twerk well. It has no dignity.
Alrighty then. So,
getting back on the subject.
Yeah. So I don't think the audience standards have changed that much. Other than if people want to look for something specific, they certainly have the means to find whatever niche thing they're looking for. But I do think the standards of production have changed. That people are a lot less likely to put their full effort into things, and things that aren't good are a lot more likely to be greenlit.
Actually, I'm going to fight you on. I want to fight back on that a little bit, Brony.
All right, go for it.
I do think audience standards have changed some.
Tell me how.
Most notably is the biggest thing I notice for audiences is the change that everyone wants serialization. Every show has to be a continuing story. Every show has to have an overarching theme or message. You can't have just standalone shows anymore. They have to continue. There have to be continuity. Like, yeah, those are some great shows. We have great shows that have that. Gravity Falls, MLP. You have some good shows with that. But you see a lot of other shows where they try to be just episodic fun, and they don't do very well nowadays.
You know something, DJ? I think I can give you that point because while you were talking about it, I was trying to think of old shows that had elements of serialization in them, but when I gave them some extra thought, it was like, oh no, those were really just episodic. And one of the things that popped into my head was the $6 Million Man or the Incredible Hulk from the 1970s with Lou Ferrigno. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so, here's the premise. He's on the run, and he's always on the run, but he's always... That's it. That's just the backdrop for the episode is the Incredible Hulk is always on the run. The $6 Million Man is always on the run. Columbo is always on his next case. And then I moved up a generation or two, and I'm like, okay, what about like Beast Wars or some of the cartoons we watched as kids? Most of them were episodic. X-Men.
Beast Wars had a plot.
Yeah, Beast Wars had a plot. It wasn't there as much. X-Men definitely was the most plot and continuity heavy show of its time, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. So I went one more generation, and I got things like Reboot and Code Lyoko in my head that had continuity, but it's like the more as time goes on, the more
it becomes important.
Yeah, the more continuity I'm seeing. Like around the same time we had Ben 10, which I haven't watched, but I know it has several iterations.
Very continuity driven.
Yep, very continuity driven. And then we start getting into the 2010s where we got Gravity Falls, Pony, G.I. Joe Renegades, Adventure Time. And it just gets more and more with each thing. So yeah, I think you've definitely got a really good point there.
Because like even growing up, I had my episodic shows. I had Camp Lazlo, I had Chowder, Flapjack, had a whole bunch of Cartoon Network's early 2000s shows. Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, all the good things that were around were just episodic fun. And where is that for the modern day kids? Where are there just fun adventures that aren't just preschool shows like Pound Puppies or whatever it is?
I think you mean like Paw Patrol.
Yeah, because like I know from what I've heard that's kind of episodic, but like where's the equivalent to My Dexter's Lab or Chowder or Powerpuff Girls? Where's the equivalent there? That's, I mean, I guess there's Teen Titans Go, but I don't think parents should let anyone watch it. No one should watch Teen Titans Go.
No one should watch Teen Titans Go.
Now that you mention it, yeah, like overarching plots have gotten like, because it used to be like, oh, we're like, we want to know more about stuff, we want more elongated plots, and like My Little Pony Gen 4 was like in the midst of that because they started out very episodic, but then as the demand was like, hey, we want more story driven things, they started to incorporate more like season long arcs for things, which was interesting to see. But at this point I'm kind of starting to hate it because now I don't want to watch other Marvel stuff, and like Star Wars stuff I kind of want to get into, but like I'm getting like fatigued by it because I'm like, great, I gotta watch this, but like there's gonna be crossovers with this stuff, so maybe I gotta draw this stuff so I get the full context of what's going on. And it's like, I don't want to do that. Like I started giving up with the Marvel stuff because it's like, hey, we have like 4 shows coming out at the same time, and it's like, I don't have time to watch all of that. I mean, who does? Who can watch all of this?
You know what show?
If I may?
Go ahead, Hariman.
Regarding Marvel, I actually burnt out on the new movie and new series grind after the original The Avengers movie, where that was 6 or so movies, all self-contained into one big wrap-up movie. And then they came out with the announcement, we're going to do this again and again and again, and with even more movies. And I don't want obligations to watch or play anything anymore. It's like, give me something that I can sit down and either watch a series once without having to watch 6 other things to get what's happening, or give me something where I don't have to know years of continuity to understand it.
Now, to address what Heather was saying a second ago, because I remembered as she was talking about it that Mau Mau and the Heroes of Pure Heart exist, and they have a couple episodes that talk about their continuity and the backstories of their characters, but it's definitely a lot more episodic than most other things have come out. And HBO Max took it from us. We will destroy them.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love you, Mau Mau.
I suppose that could also be another thing to add on, is that streaming has become so important to so many people that it's streaming services themselves have become part of the entertainment standard, where if it's not on a streaming service, it's very hard for people to find it.
Well, I think that's become more of an industry standard than that. Now, granted, more people are watching streaming services because they were trying to get away from cable, but they were trying to get away from cable because cable sucked, and now streaming services are just becoming cable. Like what I just said, I said we got to destroy HBO Max because they bought up all of Cartoon Network's shows and then just shelved them, and they're they did everything they can to completely erase it from the internet like it never existed. And they did the same thing to Megas XLR, where they literally just put it in. Yeah, they just put it in the vault and it became a tax write-off. I don't know how that works. I don't know why that's a thing, but
if they write, from what I understand, if they write a show off, they are not allowed to touch it. The rights would have to be purchased, and the amount paid by the government for that show would have to be paid back, probably with interest.
You know, I really wish, like, I don't know how, but like when I was with Sweetie Bloom, we did have cable because it came with the internet package, and that's what I would do, is that I would, since Mau Mau was airing on Cartoon Network, I did like the TiVo thing and just like recorded it using the cable box so that like on Saturday mornings I would just watch what came out like the previous day, and I had a whole bunch of like episodes just recorded so I could go back and watch them. And I'm like, was there a way I could have taken it off the cable box and put it on a drive or something? Because then I could have preserved this series.
Well, I happen to be working on that right now. Like as soon as I heard that HBO Max was doing that, I got a website. I'm just trying to figure out how to rip it off. This is why we support piracy. This is why we are proud pirates in this dojo. But anyway, the ultimate point that I was building up to is we can definitely say that audience standards have changed in that regard, because it used to be that we watched cable because that was the most convenient way to do it. There was really no other way. And then piracy.
Kids will never know the struggle of going to the bathroom during the show.
Kids won't know the struggle of trying to download things off of LimeWire and not destroy your frickin' family computer. Anyway, so then we had options with we had a few more options with piracy, and then YouTube came along, and there were other video streaming places like Dailymotion and Vimeo and things like that. And so streaming became a lot more popular. Netflix became a thing, but then everybody wanted to copy Netflix's thing. And the reason why Netflix was so popular was because it didn't have all the corporate cable bull crap of you pay $100 a month and you still get 5 minutes of ads for every 5 minutes of content. Angel of Speed goes, for legal reasons that was a joke. No, the frick it wasn't.
There's no lawyers watching us.
I listen. I don't care. Okay, change the law. I am disrespecting the law. I am disobeying it. Write better laws. This is my peaceful protest. This is my First Amendment right. Screw you. Anyway, so what people wanted was to get away from the corporate stupidity. And streaming services was a good alternative to that. And now streaming services are just as bad, if not worse. So we got to find another way. And that's until things actually fix themselves and stay fixed. That's going to be piracy. What else do we want to talk about?
Well, I was thinking about how, going back to your point about how, like, morally what we show on in our entertainment has changed, because there's a lot less misogyny. You know, like before it was just widely accepted to be like, hey, woman, obviously you should be a good mother and stay in the kitchen and raise your children. Like, I guess the best example, though, like, especially in a, like, more problematic terms, is the issue of consent. Because a lot of old attitudes were kind of like, it's okay if she technically says yes. Because, like, if you think of old James Bond's movie, there's a lot of, like, questionable consent moments. Like, there was one instance where there was a chick that he was into, and she was just like, nah, bruh. And he was like, something happened, and he had something she wanted, or was going to leak out something she didn't want leaked out. She goes like, what can I, it's like, you got to not do this thing. And he's like, well, there's one way I won't do this thing. She goes like, what? And she goes like, oh no. And he's like, yeah, have sex with me and I'll do the thing you want. Like, these days, that shit does not fly. Like, there'd be like backlash, but no, James Bond at the time, and even still now, because now he has modern iterations that aren't nearly that bad, but he was like every man's man to be like, yeah, if a girl technically says yes, then it's a yes.
Yeah, and I believe that's, I'm trying to remember, I believe that's first degree rape, where it's consent under coercion.
Yeah.
Hariman, earlier you were talking about like the obligation to watch a whole series. So what I want to know is if that is more or less a reflection of two different sides of culture, where you've got either, white collar, you got the white collar working class, or a lot of people that are unemployed and have the free time to keep up with these things. So that's the kind of thing that they like, where people like you and me who work outside of the house a lot, might not have time, so we would probably enjoy something a little bit more episodic.
I actually think that is a factor now that you bring it up. I've always looked at it from the other end, where it's the companies wanting to make more and more in the same property because they feel like that has a guaranteed audience if they just keep making like another superhero movie, another superhero show, that there will always be a big audience of X amount for that because there was for the prior one.
Right, but here's the thing, are they wrong?
There's a limit to how garbage you can make it before people go, I want something else.
Well, hopefully we'll see the collapse of the MCU, and we'll see the collapse of Disney really soon then, because I think we've passed that point a long time ago. But
I think we're seeing some of that with the new Lord of the Rings show that just started.
Oh, load damn ranks.
There's been plenty of pushback on it, and especially when it came out this past week that Amazon has staked basically its entire video production budget behind this show. If it fails and Amazon's whole thing could fail, I think it's definitely pushed a lot of people, even probably those that probably weren't going to push against it in the first place, to push against it.
You know, on the subject of both MCU burnout and on people not liking the new Rings of Power series, I've actually seen people say that they don't want so much of the MCU stuff and they want better quality stuff because the quality is dropping. I've also seen criticisms of the Rings of Power series where it's the Harfoot parts are good. They don't care about the Black Dwarves, and the Elrond and Dwarf parts are good, but Galadriel is boring. So it's like, I think it's happening in progress. I think there's just so much of an audience for it that it's taking a long time.
So how much of these changes in standards could be potentially chalked up to fads that are pretty normal in culture? We see them all the time, of things just come and go.
Yeah, like, because there definitely was the hero fad that you guys have noted is kind of petering out, and before that, like, wasn't there like a zombie apocalypse fad? We had The Walking Dead and a whole bunch of different zombie movies and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think of other popular
knockoffs of The Matrix.
Yeah, a lot of like, the world is a simulation, I'm a super cool spy-looking guy kind of movies.
80s action movies, westerns, depressing 70s movies.
You know, it goes in a cycle. Let's bring back spaghetti westerns for a bit. I feel like getting up in that.
We did have a brief resurgence of westerns. They were a little bit more gritty and violent, though, but I definitely saw a trend in the early 2000s where there seemed to be a lot of western style movies coming out.
Oh, like the Wild Wild West?
Yeah, Wild Wild West, 310 to Yuma, trying to think of some other ones. I know there were more.
Wasn't there a time where it was just constant parody movies? Or was that just the one company?
I feel like there was a lot of parody movies. There was Scary Movie, and I feel like the series.
Superhero movie.
The movie franchise, whatever the heck it was.
I do think that was the same group, and they were just so efficient, for better and for worse, at turning those things like they were parodying the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies as the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies were coming out.
Crap, what was the name of that movie? The one where Drake Bell was a superhero.
I think it was Dragonfly.
No, that doesn't sound
right. It might have been superhero movie.
It might be. That sounds more right.
I'll let me hit Google real quick.
I'm already on it.
I guess it was superhero movie, so it was part of that stupid franchise.
I tried to Google I tried to Google superhero movie, and it freaking just is giving me all. Okay, there it is, the actual superhero movie. But yeah, it's just giving me everything that's come out in the last 50 years. What the heck is Zebra Man? I'm gonna look at that later.
But going back to fads, I definitely think we're in a part where companies are desperately hanging on to the fad.
Well,
But
they're
it definitely
desperately
feels
hanging
it
on to
should
the
have
nostalgic
ended a few years
franchises.
back, but
They're desperately hanging on to the nostalgic franchises from the 70s and 80s. You know,
yeah,
and
it feels like 2010 was the decade of nostalgia, and I don't think anyone knows what to switch into, so they're desperately clinging to it and milking it for all it's worth. It's like there's going to still be the occasional gem, but at this point, it kind of feels like we're getting leftovers.
yeah, and
no one's sure what to do, especially after everything that happened through 2020 that shut everything down and basically blocked all forms of progress for movies and television and entertainment. So now everything's kind of just like it's like buffering, trying to figure out what's next to load in, and you can definitely tell there's a fear of not only the change but of what even possibly is there next, because no one's willing to take a chance on anything new.
And built into that, there's already a 2 to 3 year lag in the movie industry where it takes that long to produce movies unless you're on like a shoestring budget out in the woods and you're producing garbage that might be gold. And even then, that takes a while.
Mm-hmm. So, what I think we can definitely notice that's outside of just a fad, because I mean, fad would imply that it sort of comes in a cycle, or lasts a few years and then fades out. But going back to what we were talking about with an audience love of continuity, is that we have definitely seen a consistent and perhaps even exponential trend upwards of the amount of content that's being produced with more continuity in it. So do we think that is now I want to hear more what Hariman and Heather think of whether or not that is a good thing.
Hariman, you go first. I'm collecting my thoughts.
It depends on how well it's done. Sometimes having an overarching plot will kill a series. Like, one good example is the new Doctor Who series with Matt Smith, where, actually also with David Tennant as well, where a lot of the seasons had overarching background plots where they would show up in the first episode of the season, maybe once in the middle of the season, and then at the end. But in the second season of Matt Smith's run, it became clear that more and more the series were leaning on that to be a driving force, where you couldn't go an episode without the end of the episode reminder that the overarching plot was there. And at the end of the first season of Matt Smith's run, they literally had the last scene of the episode setting up the next giant one with the head in a box yelling, "The question that no one can answer or will destroy the universe. Doctor Who! Doctor Who! Doctor Who!" Which just became, oh, you're going to string me along and have this in every single episode. Again. Hi, Felicia.
So what do we think about this then? Because we've been talking a lot about Western animation and Western franchises tonight. Does this stuff apply to, do these changes in standards apply to anime?
Yeah, anime was a niche thing back then, and it's still a niche thing now. And it's more mainstream in the Western culture, but it straight up in Japan, anime is still a very niche thing that isn't very widely profitable in a market of just standard adults, or at least it's not supposed to be. And their working conditions certainly have not improved. Well, as animators in the West have banded together for rights and things like that, better pay, there is still like standout moments where people get screwed over. Like the person, like if you remember that one, what was it for? League of Legends music video that I liked listening to for a while. The person who was like the big animator about that got fired unceremoniously for no real reason. So things like that still occur. But in Japan, I hear it's way worse because the people who make it over there, it's been explained to me that the people who make it do it because they love the medium. They're doing it, they're not paid well to do it. There's constant overtime. It's because it's a passion, and or like at this point they don't know what else to do with their lives because they spent so long doing this. The technology and whatnot has gotten better for them as well significantly, because I believe they had to use some of the same methods, like, hey, we have to draw out every single little thing. But a lot of animes, especially I've noticed in Demon Slayer, utilize some 3D elements that fit in pretty seamlessly. Like some of their action scenes, like running sequences, are done using 3D animation, while the rest of it is rendered in 2 dimensions.
Yeah, a lot of that definitely comes from the very repressive work culture in Japan, that it's much more stringent on doing your job, whether or not you get paid well or not, as long as you have a job and are doing it, which is not necessarily the best thing, but it's hard for us over in the West to
relate to. Yeah, they're definitely voicing out about it because they do have animes like Agretzko now that like directly attacks the work life standard of Japan.
Yeah, and it's good that those exist, because it is bringing attention to that, because you do have a lot of people that do literally work themselves to death at very young ages, and it's very unfortunate.
There's also a current of that in a number of the school-based anime, where a lot of times school in anime is treated as this like constant death race where you might not survive until the next year, and if you survive it till the next year, you get to do it again. Like Naruto and a number of other series.
In my experience, high school life is always like depicted in Japanese culture, like, because if you think about it, a lot of freaking animes are based on either high school aged characters or in a high school itself, and I think it's because they kind of romanticize that parts of their life, because that might have been a point in their life where it wasn't all struggle and the grind. So that's the only time they could see themselves engaging in such a storyline that they might have constructed, because by God, it's certainly not going to happen now.
Mm-hmm. School life is such a heavy trope, where to the point where I don't think school life ones are going to be like a fad, like Brony mentioned. I think what is a fad, though, that's still surprisingly going strong, and I'm probably one of the idiots who fall for it, is the isekai genre is definitely very strong in the past 10 years.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was just watching a video from Sarcastic Chorus about that today. Well, it was mentioning isekai, but it was mostly about how like a lot of anime companies these days are kind of trying to, like, before, like the main character would be like the everyman. He's supposed to be a character anyone can relate to, and he was arguing that a lot of main protagonist guys these days are not just everymans. They're basically self-inserts of you. They have just enough character traits and lack of character traits that you can just fit into that glove. They're also talking about how harems before were kind of something that stood out and a lot of people were attracted to. Now there's just an overabundance of harem anime. Like, it's all about, it's all about the best girls. And that's what makes that characterization of, like, the self-insert so easy to get past, because you're not even watching the show for him. You're watching for the girls and to see the person that is supposed to be you interact with those girls.
It's the Tenchi Muyo effect, where Tenchi is there as the bland everyman, where all the interesting characters interact around him, but it's become like the industry standard instead of something that only happens like sometimes, where it seems like almost every show the main character collects this group of women that follows him around.
Yeah, like, you can get the beginning of an isekai, like, down to a T, because these days it's normally like, oh, this character was a loser in regular life, but then he died, and God said, go to this new dimension and live your new life, and they go to the new dimension, and they scream for a minute, and they're like, okay. Where
I
are my
think-
bitches?
I think that might be a reflection of
Escapism.
escapism.
Oh, totally. But if it's done this many times, it's no longer just catching in on escapism. It's also like the viewers know this formula and they like that formula and they will keep watching it because it is their formula.
Mhm.
Although you do also have to wonder if the reason there's so many out there, because almost pretty much every anime you see nowadays is based on a pre-existing story, either a manga or a light novel or something. So it makes you wonder is how prevalent this is in Japanese culture of wishing that they were in a different world, one that they themselves could be a better part of. Because especially in Japanese culture, you literally are a cog in the machine that is of very little importance.
Indeed.
That is a sad thought.
It's ultra depressing. I don't know what the suicide rate is in Japan, but I have heard it is high, and there's like a mountainside dedicated to not dedicated, but a lot of people die there, and it's become like a place to do that
Suicide
at now.
forest.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Any place that has a suicide forest, I assume, has too many suicides happening in it.
Yeah, that was where that Paul brother got in trouble for recording after they
Oh,
found.
let's not revisit that.
Well, here's the
I'm
thing.
not trying to bring up the event. I'm just like,
as
it is real that this does happen.
Just as a quick aside here, any amount of suicide is too much.
Exactly.
Agreed.
So let's ask one more question here before we get into the audience participation. For the changes in standards of the cultures between then and now, what are the good ones and what are the bad ones? What have had a positive effect or have been the result of something positive, and which ones have been just bad overall? Heather, what do you think?
Could you repeat your question, actually?
Of the standards that have changed, which ones have been good for us, good for the entertainment, or good for the culture, and which ones have been bad?
All right. Well, I would definitely say I'm glad that we are all like, hey, respect women, make money. I'm glad that like questionable consent is no longer a thing we are good with in modern media, and a lot of like gender roles have certainly changed. A lot of that is very good, but though I guess you could say that's to an extreme, because even though I'll use Captain Marvel as an example, I like that movie. A lot of people don't like, just OP female characters now, because that's almost the standard now, that if you depict a woman weak, you are a misogynist. It can't be that she's a flawed character or anything like that. So it's a lot of trying to find the balance there.
All right. Hariman, what do you think?
I think on the whole, the mainstream production values and even to a certain extent, audience expectations standards on both sides have gone down and been a bad thing on both sides. But on the other hand, the easier production of independent productions and easier access to things like that kind of balance that out, where if you go outside of Hollywood, you get a ton of things that are even better and respect the franchises they use or create new franchises to enjoy. And like webcomics didn't exist in like the 80s and most of the 90s. But if you go out and read some of the webcomics, they have plots better than the majority of Hollywood movies, including some of the better ones. And they're more accessible and friendlier communities too, a lot of times. So it's a mixed bag for me.
DJ, what do you think?
So a good thing and a bad thing?
Yeah. About what has changed.
What has changed is the good thing I would definitely say is I feel like a lot of modern entertainment does have a passion behind it, where a lot of earlier stuff, especially in the 80s, it definitely felt like it was more for marketing. So I feel like there's a lot more passion in the industry, even if it's stuff I don't like. So I'm glad that there is a stronger passion out there and love for entertainment. On the downside, though, I believe too many times, especially in the past 10 years, messaging has overtaken some parts of entertainment where as long as the message is good, that means the show, the movie, whatever is good. And that is too much. That is way too much leeway for anyone to make anything as long as it sounds good to make people think it is good, which you're just going to get horrible quality, which is what a lot of the MCU has turned into, what Doctor Who has turned into. It's too much preaching without actually being entertaining.
Alrighty then.
So even if what they're saying is good, if it's not surrounded by good entertainment, it's not good.
Well, gosh darn it, DJ, you stole my bad point. For the good, I'll say that the pendulum swings, and with each time it swings to one extreme or the other, society as a whole gets a little bit closer to balance and center. So I hope soon the pendulum will swing back with what we've been learning watching entertainment evolve over the last 10, 20 years. And we can get a little bit closer to balancing good entertainment, continuity, the messages that we show, the morals that we teach, and episodic, making it easy for those who want to get invested, and those who want to watch casually to just watch casually. So, because that's really all I want is I want quality writing, I want good acting, and I want balance. And I know that's asking a lot, but that's what I'm looking for right now. If there's no other thoughts or anything anybody wants to bring up, I think now's a good time to get into audience participation. Agreed?
Yeah.
All right. So we don't have a whole lot today, so we might even get out of here early. Paladin Pony T says, do you think we need some more 2D stuff or maybe a fusion of 3D and 2D? Now, I'd like to address this one real quick. There has been a combination of 3D and 2D for way longer than you may have externally recognized. The problem is that you only notice it when it's bad, right? Like the reason why because superhero movies had, we talked a lot about those tonight, but they had a fad in the early 1990s. There was a Captain America movie. There was Blade in the 2000s and things. But the reason why they're really just starting to explode in the 2010s is because we had the technology to bring all of the crazy, fantastical stuff into a live action looking setting and make the animation look real while reducing the uncanny valley not needing to rely on practical effects, which when they're good are extremely good, but still have their limitations. You can't, you can only go so far with a practical effect of shooting lightning out of your hands, and you can only go so far with a computer effect of shooting lightning out of your hands. So, to that, hang on just a second here. So, like I said, and with Heather brought up Demon Slayer, and they switch between 3D and 2D a lot, but you don't notice it because it's all blended very well. It's been going on like that for 20, 30 years, and the only time you really do notice it is when someone didn't do their job right and it just looks bad. But
I definitely would. Sorry.
Yeah. So I do prefer the aesthetic of 2D, personally. What do you guys think about this?
I was gonna say I do like 2D. I definitely want to see more 2D. I think we had a little bit of a scare back a little while back about like not being able to see more 2D like big movies much anymore, because it seemed like Disney was going in that direction, and whatever direction Disney goes, everyone else goes. I definitely would like to see more 2D on the big screen, but as far as on the small screen and like on online, the Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel are like big things right now. I don't think 2D is going anywhere. I just always like more. Doesn't mean I would like throw away 2D, and hybrids more than welcome to it because it seems to help the process.
What I hope is that with 3D becoming easier and quicker and cheaper to produce, that because I don't think 2D is going anywhere either, at least not for a little bit. But there is definitely a trend over the last 20 years of 3D replacing 2D because it just keeps getting quicker and easier to do so, especially as physics engines and AIs for animating things like hair movement and eyes and things like that are getting easier. So at a certain point, and people have already tried it, to just automate, like completely automate an animating process. So that's what's going on there. What are you saying, DJ?
I was gonna say I've noticed that trend as well, and it's unfortunate that 2D has become not as popular as it used to be, especially when you had such huge animated projects, especially through the 90s, that used animation to its highest. With going back to Disney, a lot of the Disney Renaissance, you had some amazing movies with brand new styles of 2D animation using live models that was amazing. If you look at like Hercules or not Snow White, Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, you had some amazing 2D projects, and it's definitely fallen out of favor with how much more cost-effective 3D is. But I'm definitely glad like Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel are growing in the 2D animation, and it's definitely making a bit of a resurgence. And I don't want one to do better than the other, but I want there to be a good balance where there's enough 2D to match 3D so everyone can be happy, and let hybrids exist as well. Like I've seen in a lot of anime this season, there's a lot more CGI, and it doesn't always blend well, but it also makes sense why they would do it, because some of the stuff for anime, if you don't have the right animator behind it, your action scenes are going to look like crap.
So let me ask everybody this: have we all seen the movie Klaus?
Yes.
I have not, but I was going to bring that up as a good example of using 3D to make 2D style animation.
Yes, and that's the point I was going to make in response to DJ there, is that a lot of people are seeing 3D replacing 2D, so what they're doing is they're using the advancements in 3D to create a 2D aesthetic.
It's perfectly fine because it's very similar. It doesn't have to be exactly 2D. I'm not like saying like we need to go back to art cells. We need to do everything by hand drawn. Like no, 2D can still have an easy process. Even if you're using 3D, if you make something that's in the same style, I still count that as 2D.
Mm-hmm. Or Dragon Ball Legend in the indie sphere that just came out a month ago.
Oh, that little short.
Yeah.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Oh, I
also,
know you.
Go see the superhero movie. That's one of the few times where CGI looks amazing.
Oh, where? Who?
Dragon Ball Superhero, the new Dragon Ball movie, is like all in 3D CGI.
Oh, I heard
it looks splendid.
I heard the story sucked.
No, the story is hilarious and it's amazing.
Yeah.
If you talk to Dragon Ball fans that have seen it, it is the best thing Dragon Ball has made in forever, even compared to the Broly movie, to the point where Toriyama, who I think helped write for this, but when he actually saw the movie, said he was actually inspired by it for the first time in like 20 years.
Interesting. Mr. Warrior Ace says, did you mention streaming services? We did. If you are interested in our thoughts about that, I would recommend listening to the stream after we're done. And if we missed anything you wanted to bring up, send me a tweet or a Tumblr message about it. And we'll address it another time, or leave a comment on this video once it's done processing. Let's see here. Angel of Speed says, I'm just going to say this. studios don't have to worry about liberals and leftists as much as they did in the olden days. Here's the thing.
I think they...
Go ahead, Heather.
Actually, I lost my train of thought of this. Like, I think they probably did get backlash back then, but just for different things. You know,
Yeah.
like it swung from like, oh, you showed a woman wearing pants. That goes against the standard right now, to where it's like, you only show this woman cooking and giving her traditional women roles. Like, it's that pendulum you're talking about. They did have complainers back then, but they were complaining about something else, because you're always just going to have that. You're always going to have saying, hey, something's morally wrong with what you made, or something you made here doesn't agree with my politics, so I think it's bad. You're always going to have that. It's just like, who is it this time, you know?
Right. And it's always, and even back then, it's always been a vocal minority of morality police and virtue signalers that we should all know from life experience by now are really just a bunch of hypocrites. So,
I mean, I think it was some of that sentiment that led to the first Disney strike way back when.
might have been. I'm not as familiar with the history behind that, but yeah,
But
just
I think Walt was very anti-communist at that point, and to the point he was getting very paranoid, and it started to affect his workers, who then went on strike.
I've heard a few
least
different.
from what I
I've heard a
remember.
few different theories about it, but I'm not an expert and I don't really care. I just want Disney to stop existing. But what I'm saying here is, it's always been a vocal minority. And while back then you would have described those ethics and the moral police to be more conservative, and now they're a bit more liberal. It's always just been, for the most part, people don't care. They just want it to be good. And a common complaint of entertainment back then, like you take Leave It to Beaver, for example, and some people liked Leave It to Beaver because it's like, okay, this is a good example of something that we can aspire to. Or you like Andy Griffith was another example of that. Or like John Wayne movies, and this is a hero, and this is a representation of masculinity that we should look up to. Whereas you had people that thought that, but then you also had a lot of people like, yo, this isn't real. And I don't like it because it's not real, but I have to watch it because there's nothing else. Otherwise, I got to talk to my family, and God knows I don't want to do that either.
I'm not going into my childhood, but nowadays I'd much rather to watch something like Leave It to Beaver than something that's real and has everything falling apart around the family because it's real.
Yeah. And
we should be aspirational towards actual functional families.
Right. What I would like to see is, again, balance. I would like to see people eventually... This is why I like Friendship is Magic so much, is because you had these flawed characters that were relatable and talked like real people, but then they actually learned a lesson and got better and became even more believable because of it. That you don't usually get that balance, and the reason why we got so much of that, especially in like sitcoms from the late 1990s, early 2000s onwards, is because it was popular, because people like watching dysfunction. That's why reality shows were such a thing and still are to a degree. Paladin Pony T, I did see your comment. Anyway,
Definitely, maybe that should have been something we mentioned during the chat. Is what role does cynicism play in a lot of these standards? Because you definitely see a lot of cynicism in modern media.
It's gone beyond. It's gone so far beyond cynicism into outright nihilism and hatred of everything.
Yeah, like
in a
Rick
lot
and Morty,
of modern media, where like Rick and Morty is one of the nice shows about it because there's happiness sometimes in that show for the characters.
Or BoJack Horseman, yeah.
Yeah, I can't watch that show because it hits too close to home. I get why people like it, though.
I mean, even with the good shows like Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel, there's some cynicism, but it's ironic that the shows about hell are more hopeful than most other media you see.
And I was always of the mentality of, listen, I deal with these freaking idiots enough in real life. Why would I want to deal with them more in my entertainment? But that's me going for escapism. So let's see what else we got here. Paladin Pony T says, you think it is possible to find something so old that it's new? I'm not entirely certain I understand that question, but what do you guys think?
I think I get it. It's that, like, can you think of something so old that you haven't seen it portrayed in media in such a long time that if you brought it out now, people would act like it's a whole brand new thing, like, whoa, I hadn't thought to make a movie or a TV series based off of this.
I think we just saw that sort of reaction when Tom Cruise put out Top Gun Maverick, and it was basically an updated, straight, nothing crazy or nothing different, anything sequel to the original Top Gun in the same
A modern
80s
day,
action hero vein.
yeah, modern day 80s movie.
Yeah. And I think that's why that movie was so popular, is because that has been done so little that once everybody saw it, it was like, fun, joy. We can watch these people be heroes and be happy and not have them break down twice before they get out of the bathroom. And the villain isn't actually the good guy, and the hero leader of the leader hero group isn't actually the villain again.
Yep.
You
Feel like
almost would watch something like that with a level of distrust, because it's like, are you the bad guy? Because I've seen this happen before. The people closest to you will hurt you. I'm almost like, when is the other shoe gonna drop? And then it doesn't. It's like, was it really like surface level? I could have just believed in you the whole time.
You know something?
And then you go back and watch it, and you get to be teary-eyed because it's actually nice.
When I asked earlier this week, what should we talk about on tonight's podcast? Last night I got a last minute submission from Silver Quill that is basically that topic right there. So that hold on to that feeling, and hopefully we'll get Silver Quill on in a couple of weeks to talk about his suggestion, and we can mention that type of thing.
I will want to join that debate when the time comes.
Yeah, it's always great having Silver Quill on. The dude's way too cultured. I can barely keep up.
He reads.
Yeah, and not even.
I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh fan. We don't read.
And not even. Yeah. Well, I mean, shoot, I would read a lot more if I didn't have 3 jobs. So.
Although going
I
back
read comics.
You mean webcomics?
Yes, of course. I mean, I have physical ones, but like I don't want to bring those out. I just want to open up my iPad and look at webtoons.
You can find some pretty good webcomics out there. And I can give you some recommendations after the stream.
Oh, I could give some back to you.
I don't know about it.
Going back to the question about the so old it's new, I know it's been rebooted recently, but I kind of feel like if they did another sitcom of the Addams Family, I think it would feel very fresh to a lot of people.
Really, because they've rebooted it with movies a couple of times, and it's always just been a bit over the top weird.
Well, I know. I think that's why it would be fresh to a lot of people, is that they're so weird. But if you look back through the original sitcom, they're the nicest people ever.
Mm-hmm.
The Addams Family are so nice that it would just blow people's mind to have people that are into all this gothic stuff, and they're just the nicest people in the world. Going back to all the cynicism that there is nowadays, having a show with that much happiness, I think would break everyone.
Alrighty, I can see that, and I would definitely give that a shot. Doug's Film and TV says, what do you think makes a good show entertaining?
That's rather
broad. That is
character investment. I honestly think it's character investment, where you start to like the people you're seeing, and you want to see how they deal with everything and how they find their happiness. Unless it's a sadism series where they're all jerks and you want to see how they suffer for being jerks, which I can't watch those series either.
Yeah, because you deal with it too much in real life.
And that's just the Friday the 13th movies, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Or any slasher fic, really.
40 minutes with jerks, then 50 minutes with the slasher.
Can I also say aesthetic? I love good aesthetic.
Music.
I think if you have a good character, you have a good world building, and you have a decent enough story where they can all work, I think you're going to be fine for entertainment.
Make good thing. Make good thing good.
Music can actually pull me into a series, because that's actually one of the reasons why I was initially willing to watch Friendship is Magic, is a coworker of mine was talking it up pretty well, and I was never really interested. And the only thing he could get me to watch was the compilation video, Ponies the Anthology.
Oh.
But when it hit the end credits of Ponies the Anthology, there was this really fun chiptune, and then it scrolled up in the credits, 8-bit version of this song from the series, and I looked up the song from the series, and it was like, huh, that's actually a really good song. I think I actually do want to give this show a try. And then I watched the first two-parter episode, and it was like, oh my god, they actually made a good show. I'm going to watch more. Get my popcorn.
And another Brony was made.
Just like babies.
Alrighty then, moving on.
I knew someone was going to say it. I should have just guessed it was Heather.
Trent says... Trent Jerome says, random question, Brony. Thoughts on Mario versus PETA? And I have no idea what you're talking about. Those are my thoughts. Does anybody know what he's talking about?
I know what those two things are. I feel like I know what those two things are separately. If we mean Mario, like Mario and Luigi from Nintendo, and PETA, I don't know why they would be put against each other. But that is an interesting fight, and I want to see it.
Oh, I remember I think PETA did a Flash game or a campaign against Mario because he wore the Tanuki suit.
The fuck?
For some reason, they were under the impression every time Mario put on that suit, he was skinning actual Tanukis to wear it.
Yeah, sounds like something PETA would do.
PETA did that stupid Flash game for Pokemon, too.
Yep.
PETA just wants attention, even if they're wrong. Just forget they exist and the world's a better place.
I guess. Yep. I
Although
agree.
if you see their truck, shoot it.
Shoot it with what?
Anything, because they have been known to kidnap pets to euthanize them.
Ah, okay. Buckshot then. Got it.
Bazooka.
The buckshot is when we fire you out of a cannon, right, Brony?
You know what? I'll go with I'll do that too.
Why did Heather sound so happy about that? It's like she wants to use
Dude,
Brony
have
as a
you seen... do you know how solid his head is? We'd freaking break so many things.
You could use Brony to break into Fort Knox.
His skull deflected a bullet.
Well, that was a tranquilizer dart.
Too.
Yes.
Well, let's test a bullet.
I got grazed.
See Brony do crimes.
I got grazed by a sniper bullet that was apparently rubber, right? So it wasn't meant to be lethal anyway. And I deflected a tranquilizer dart. So not exactly a bullet.
All right, the hard to say anything review with what was it? Voice of Reason taking pot shots.
Yeah, it was Voice of Reason and Novella. So yeah, that was a fun review to make. I think that was the last video I did on my MacBook. Hated editing on it. Well, no, I still used it for another 3 years after that, but it was just so hard making videos on that thing. But that's all besides the point. I don't have any more audience participation. Did anybody else see anything they wanted to address in the chat?
No, I think we're good on the questions and whatnot.
Alrighty then. So, let's go around the table here. Heather, one thing, so give us some closing thoughts and one thing you learned tonight.
I learned that I really just want simpler entertainment.
Mm-hmm. And,
yeah.
All right, and I think that could answer both of those questions there.
Oh, hold on
DJ,
one sec.
what's up?
I would think my closing thought is I do these old versus new for one reason and one reason only, to make more propaganda that G.I. Joe should be rebooted, particularly G.I. Joe Renegades. Call me Hasbro.
Somehow I
Alrighty
do it.
then.
I knew it.
Always.
And DJ, closing thoughts and one thing you learned tonight.
Closing thoughts is entertainment's going to change. It will always change. So I think we need to treasure the good parts in both and watch out for the bad parts. As for learning anything, I just like hearing other people's thoughts on entertainment. It's always a good way to reach out and understand people's perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Media is so wide and has such a different effect on everyone.
Alrighty then. Hariman.
I learned something. I'll figure it out at some point.
Well, give us some closing thoughts then.
I think writers have lost the ability to focus many times on writing quality characters and compelling situations for those characters. And they're focusing on the surface elements, which is like that one kid in school who focuses on being cool, but he's trying so hard that even the nerds and the losers mock him because he's a tryhard and he's not cool. So just focus more on the basics of getting the characters, the world, the story all together and get that working right, and you'll end up with classics. And the best example I can think of that is in the movie Alien. Ellen Ripley was actually supposed to be a male character in the original script, but Sigourney Weaver did so well in the audition that they just decided to adjust the script, and the role was written open enough that she fit into the role pretty easily, and we got one of the classics. Write good first, and everything else follows.
Alrighty then. I can get behind that. Alrighty then, and let me think for a second. What are my closing thoughts? I think we need to find balance. Just be more like me. This is the one time I'm gonna recommend being more like me. Be more picky with what you watch. Don't just watch everything. If you know it's gonna be bad, don't bother with it, because you're giving attention to things and you're going to encourage more people to just create more of this trash. So those are my closing statements. If you want things to improve, then show that you have these standards, and just don't give attention to things that don't deserve it in the first place. For things that I learned, I definitely learned about the trend towards continuity. So we'll, that's going to be an interesting thing to see if people, if the industry rather, increases that trend in the way that it's been increasing over time, or if it ever swings back the other way.
So, could I add one more thought on continuity?
Of course.
Two series that did continuity very well are Avatar: The Last Airbender and the Gargoyles animated series.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them had sections of the series where you could watch the episodes in any order in that section and it would all still make sense. But they had big tentpole episodes where after that episode, everything was changed, and you would have another set of episodes where you would have another set of episodic stuff, and then you would have another big episode that would change things a bit. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to return to that formula where you don't have to watch every single episode, and there's only key episodes that advance the story, and you can have a little more flexibility in between, so the writers aren't under pressure to always move the plot forward, always have something. And you can have the episodic adventures that go off the rails, and then the characters will come back to the main part, but it's not oppressively there all the time.
Alrighty then. So I think that's a good spot to end it for tonight. Thanks to everybody for coming out and watching. If it's your first time viewing, I hope I've earned your continued viewership. Please have a wonderful weekend. Big thanks to all of my very generous supporters on Patreon, especially those on the $10 and up tier, such as Princess of the Blossom. Thanks for suggesting the topic tonight. As well as Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Senko, Kyle Christensen, DJ who's with us, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, Pony Cordero, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden MacManx, EasyModeGamer, Kanto Acrylic VA, ZoroArc 720, Mr. Sonic 31, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Check out all their descriptions. Did everybody have fun tonight?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right,
Yeah.
Heather, did we get the most out of your topic suggestion?
I think so, and if not, I'll bother you to do it again.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.
You too.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.